Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Sara Rosett, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hi, and welcome to this edition of Authors Love Readers podcast. I am delighted to have as my guest today, Sara Rosett. We met online first, I think.
I think so.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Sara writes mysteries, but I will let her tell you the details of that. And after we met online, then we also met in person at a couple conferences, the Novelist Inc. conference, which the listeners of this podcast are quite familiar with because there seems to be this odd connection.
Yes.
And then we were both in London in March of this year, 2020, which was a very interesting time to be there and to be traveling.
Yes, it
But
was.
First, Sara, tell us about your writing.
Okay, well, I write mysteries, and I have several different types that I write. I write cozy mysteries was what I started out with, and those are more Agatha Christie type stories, but they're set in the modern day. And I have a couple of series that I write for that. And then recently I've moved into historical mysteries, and I write a series set in the 1920s in London. So I'm really enjoying the historical aspect of it. For me, there's not that much difference in the appeal of the stories. People who like the cozy mysteries usually like the historical mysteries as well. They're both pretty lighthearted and have kind of fun, interesting characters. But I'm enjoying. I always write mysteries, so everything I do has a mystery element to it.
When you have a story idea, do you immediately know which one of the series it's going to go to?
Yes, yeah, I usually have some sort of initial idea, and it's usually linked right away to one of the series, or I'm thinking about the characters or like the last place they were. I have one that's a travel series, and so that one's really easy. You know, if I travel somewhere, I usually want to write about it. So, yeah, so usually it's linked to the series from the moment I start pondering on it.
So when you're doing the travel series and you've traveled someplace and you're thinking you're going to write a murder mystery there, what sort of things do you look at? What sort of research do you do while you're there that the ordinary tourist wouldn't?
Well, I'm sure people do this anyway, but I take tons of photos, as many as I possibly can, in videos, so that I can go back and look and I can go, oh, yes, that street was a cobbled street or that street was paved, because it's those little tiny details that I tend to get stuck on when I'm writing. I'm like running them, or I'll be writing about them running down in a street and I'll think, oh, were there cobblestones? Were there not? Did that street turn? And it's usually it's more often than not based on a real place I've been, even if I sort of fictionalize it. So I try and keep it as realistic to the place as I can. And it just helps me to have those images. And I usually don't take a lot of notes when I travel, but when I get back, I will begin to think about, how I can work in what I've seen into the story.
I call those granite steps questions because in my very first published book, I had this sudden panic that I had this offhand reference to people walking up granite steps to a courthouse in Wisconsin. And I thought, what if for some reason they don't have granite steps in Wisconsin?
Panic!
Yes. So I ended up calling all these county courthouses, and I felt like at the fourth or fifth one, the people going, "Are you crazy? Just go away."
And it's those things that matter to us as
I know. Well,
writers.
I got this woman. She was the county clerk, and her son was a geologist. So she
there you
said,
go.
"Yes." I thought, whew, okay.
There
So,
you
yes, I know those questions.
Yes. Sometimes those little details, sometimes they don't matter at all, but sometimes they're what, they give me, like, the next clue or the next idea, so sometimes those
Yeah.
details can be really important.
So, you said the next clue. So you write in order?
I do. I'm a very linear
This is
person.
You
Probably
start at the beginning and go to the end? How odd.
it is, it's strange. No, that's usually what I do is and if I tried right out of order, it's like my brain just cannot do it because I feel like I've left this whole section empty. Like if I think, "Oh, I'll go write the ending." I feel like I can't write that until I've written the part that comes before it. And so for some reason, that's just how my brain works. I don't know why. Um, but the times that I've attempted to skip around, it has not gone well.
Well, that's the your way is the way writing teachers prefer.
It's the
Teach
traditional
Writing
way. It
teachers
is.
frown on me,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah. But
it's
everybody has
whatever get
yeah. Everybody has their own process, and if if you don't need to write an order, then I think that would be really cool in a way because then you could skip around and do different things, which my brain doesn't work that way, but if yours does, then that's great.
yeah. I warned Sarah ahead of time that I would jump around with questions, so you just said something I wanna follow up on in talking about the process. So, what is your favorite part of the process?
Oh, that's a tough question. I love research, especially when it involves travel. That's one of my favorite things to do. Well, I don't like the actual getting there, but once I'm there, I enjoy it. I love research. I love reading, especially with this historical book series. I spend a lot of time reading fiction and nonfiction, and
Mm,
that really inspires me. So I love that stage where you're gathering information and everything's kind of brewing in my head, and I'm figuring out, oh, this will go together here, and I can pull in this person. I like that. I really getting the first draft down is hard for me. It's painful.
uh,
So I'm always glad when I get done and then I can go back and revise. So I enjoy writing and I'm trying to enjoy the process of getting it on paper more, but that's still not my favorite part.
do you outline beforehand?
I have a general idea of where the story's going. I don't do a super detailed outline, but I do jot down notes about, okay, this is going to happen, like what we would call the first act, and this is in the middle, and this is at the end. And I usually know where the story's going, and it usually doesn't deviate from that a whole lot. Sometimes I'll have things happen that are, oh, that was different, or I didn't expect that. But I've only had a couple of times where the person that I thought was the murderer was not the murderer. So most of the time, I'm pretty sure where the story's going, and it tends to go that direction.
When in the process did you realize the murderer wasn't the murderer for those that
Oh,
that
I
did
think
happen?
I was usually probably about halfway in, maybe a third or halfway, and I remember specifically one book I had this person that I knew this person did it, and it just wasn't working, and I thought, "Ah, what else can I do here?" And then I started rearranging things, and I thought, "Oh, you know what? It's much better if it's this other person," and then it all just came together. So,
Mm,
it's one of those things that it's a little intuitive, but, doesn't happen to me a lot. I hear a lot of people say, they're just completely surprised when they write and they don't know what's gonna happen, and if I did that, when I started out, if I had no idea what was gonna happen with anything in the book, I would just be paralyzed. I wouldn't be able to write anything at all, so I kinda have to have a general idea of where the story's going.
yeah, I seldom know. And one time I thought for sure I knew, and I'm
Mhm,
writing away, and I was actually I always come up to deadline, but this time
mhm.
I was ahead, and I was like giddy, and I was ahead. I knew who the murderer was. This was going to be great, and I'm writing away, and he ends up dead.
Oh, no.
I go, this is a problem. And I couldn't undo his deadness. So
Right.
Yeah,
So
it
what
was.
do you do? I'm curious, do you just keep writing or do you have to wait and figure it out a little bit and then get back to the
I
page?
jumped around.
Ah, there you go.
I knew something else was gonna happen, so wrote that, and as I wrote that, I went, "Oh, oh, okay."
Oh,
Um,
very cool.
and then I went back, and, he still stayed dead, so, I had to figure out why he died. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
that's
adventure.
interesting. It sounds
Uh
like it.
So we skipped away from I wanna ask you some of these questions about to let the readers get to know you better about
Okay.
oh, did you have a childhood book that addicted you to stories?
I remember I read The Secret Garden, and I loved that. It was, set in England, and see, a lot of the book series I write now are set in England, and I think there was something about that old country manor with a beautiful garden that just appealed to me, so I love that, and I did read a lot of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. Those were some of my
Mm,
favorite growing up because, I grew up in the Midwest, the flat plains, so I could identify with that, so, yeah, those were 2 of my memories of childhood books that I really enjoyed.
now I grew up in Illinois, outside of Chicago, but I still get, um I love mountains, I like the
Mhm,
coast, but there is still something about, like, coming over a slight rise and seeing cornfields
mhm.
just stretched out that catches my heart. Do you have that
Oh, ye
reaction to
oh,
those
yeah.
scenes?
Yeah, there's something about the wide open spaces that I think people don't appreciate because, like, where I grew up, it was flat, 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 flat,
Mm,
like a plane. There was
yeah,
and were very few trees as well, and, but the sky, you could see the sky so well, and the variety in the clouds that would come in and the storms and stuff, it's just, it's a different appreciation of beauty. It's like, I do
yes.
love the mountains. I love to go to the beach. The mountains are actually my favorite place to go on
Uh,
vacation.
uh,
But, there's a barrenness to the landscape where I grew up, but there's also a beauty.
there is, yeah, and
Mhm,
that openness that you're talking about the storms, I can recall too being in Wyoming and the
mm,
idea of being able to see the storm coming from so far off
mhm.
was fascinating,
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
Okay, yes, I am going all over the place here. Um, do you have, I think most writers do this, have bad habit words that show up in your work, at least in your first draft all the time?
Oh, yes. Yes, yes,
What
yes.
are your bad habit words?
Well well, that's one right there. Well, really,
Oh,
very.
yeah.
But I've noticed that as I'm writing this historical series, when I read the fiction of the time, they have all these great expressions and things, and they loved adjectives and adverbs, and so I throw in more of those in the dialogue than I would in a modern mystery. So,
Mm,
everything is ghastly. It was a ghastly party, or it was horribly dull, or stuff like that. And they say rather and quite a lot. So I have to go back and search for those because you only need to say it was rather boring, a few times. You don't need to
yes.
say it like 50.
Well, I love some of the expressions that the British use that we tend not to, and that would be fun to be able to use, and then to be able to use them from certain historic eras.
Yes. Oh, it's
Um,
great. It's great fun. And I think that in this most recent book that I've just finished, it's set in England in 1923. So I have all the British slang, the posh set used, like, that's not cricket and
uh,
topping or Cheerio, things like that. But then I had an American character come in, and there's a lot of fun language from America during that time too. So he was always saying things like, "Let me put you wise," stuff like that.
that's terrific. And how did you find the resources for those for the
A,
slang?
a lot of it is just reading fiction from that time period. So I read like when I first started, I read Agatha Christie's Tommy and Tuppence
Yes.
series. And, they have great dialogue. Like the first scene is like, hello, old bean. Hello,
Yeah.
old thing. So a lot of it I just picked up from that, and I would just pull little comments and phrases that they would use. And then there's mostly it's just reading the fiction of the time, and then there are some great resources online that have articles that kind of like give you a list of all the slang. And if I'm having trouble thinking of a certain word, I'll go look. And then my
That's
readers,
terrific.
yeah.
I always like gobsmacked.
Oh
I know
yes, I love
was
that.
was that from that was that around in the 20s? Do you get to use that?
Yes, yeah, gobsmacked, and there are certain words that I cannot use that my editor will put a little note in there and say, "Did you know that this wasn't used until 1960?" or something like that. And, one of them is Art Deco, which, a lot of the
Oh my
arch
gosh.
architecture stuff, we would say it's Art Deco, but that term was not used until, I believe, 1950 or something, so I have to find some other way to describe Art Deco. So, yeah, it's really interesting what words they used and what they didn't.
So did they call it modern? Uh,
Yes, I think they called it modern. Um, there was some other phrase that I used. I can't remember what it was right now, but there was some other term, and of course, I can't think of it off the top of
yeah,
my head.
yeah, but
But
that's really interesting. I had no idea Art Deco was as a term was so
yeah,
recent.
yeah,
That's fascinating.
yeah.
Okay. Have you had any surprising jobs in your life?
Oh, I've had some fun jobs. My very first job was a babysitter for this family we knew. The parents both worked, and so I kept their kids for a couple of hours every day because they did shift work. So they only needed a couple of hours covered. And so I stayed with kids for part of the day. And that made me decide I didn't want to have children for a while, for quite a while, actually. And let's see, I worked at a travel company. That was my first like full-time job. I wrote travel itineraries, and I think that's one reason I like the travel is
Huh.
appealing to me. We had this, it was a organization that would arrange um, delegations between professionals in the United States with their counterparts in foreign countries. And so we
Oh.
would arrange, it was a research writing job. So it was like perfect for me. And so I would research the countries they would go to and the places they could visit that would be similar. Like if it was a delegation of, eye doctors, they would meet with other eye doctors and maybe go tour hospitals or something. And then they would have cultural days. And so I'd write about where they would visit and what they could go see. And then I would create this document that had like a plausible schedule of what they could do. And so I got to describe, like if they're going to be in Prague, they're going to go to the Charles Bridge and what it would look like. And so that was a lot of fun. Those
But
are
you
probably
didn't get to go on the trips.
no, no, I had to do
Oh.
all my research in books. Back at that time, it was all
Yeah.
books and magazines, and the internet was not a really good source of information. This is a long time ago,
Yeah.
back in the dark ages. But, that was probably my most interesting job. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And did you have the travel bug before that?
Oh, yeah,
Or do you think
because
that gave it to you?
oh, no, I had it before that because I used to read all this, like, classic romantic suspense is what I call it or think of it as, like, Mary Stuart, Elizabeth
Mm.
Peters, where the heroine would go to these beautiful locations, Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, and see all these places, and, meanwhile, I'm reading that living in the flat plains of Texas, and there's, like, nothing to see except the sky and the clouds, and so it made me wanna go visit places that were different.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Have now you're writing books set in the UK. Have
Mhm.
you ever considered writing a book or writing a series in the US? And what started you writing in the UK?
Well, my first series was the Ellie Avery series, and that was the Cozy series, and that was based I got the idea because I was a military spouse, and we moved all the time, and I thought, "What a great concept for a cozy series," because my character can go to a new place, she can meet new people, get
Uh,
involved in a mystery, and then move to a new location a couple books later, and it kinda give it I thought it would give the series, like, a refresh every so often so it wouldn't get Cabot Cove syndrome, you know?
Yeah.
So, but there were other problems that I didn't foresee because, you know, with cozies, it's all about the relationships in the community. So, transplanting her to a new place was a little tricky, but
Huh.
so that series was set in the US because it was places that we had lived that I fictionalized. And so I've had people email me and say, "This Greenlee Air Force Base, that's an awful lot like," and I'm like, "Yes, yes, ding, 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 you win." So, yeah, so I wrote that one in the US, and, then I wanted to write a series set in England because part of it was this is also a contemporary series, and I love Jane Austen books,
Uh-huh.
movies, adaptations, and there's, like, this little cottage industry in the publishing industry, like, it's like this little tiny segment that Jane Austen just sells. People love her, they're interested in her books, they're interested, you know, there's all this Jane Austen fan fiction,
Right.
and I thought maybe, you know, I love Jane Austen, but I'm not gonna try and write fan fiction, but I thought maybe I could write a contemporary cozy about a woman who's a location scout, and she goes to England, and they're searching for a place to film a new adaptation for a new Jane Austen movie, like a remake of one of her
Mhm.
stories. And I was like, that will let me indulge all of my love of England, you know? So that was how I got started writing about England. The contemporary cozy was the first one I wrote.
And then that became a series, and what's that series called?
So that was called the Murder on Location series. And the
How
first one
cool.
is called Death in the English Countryside.
And then so then she scouts new locations and
Yeah, so it still has that element of a little bit different with each book, but they do have a base where they stay. And um, that one she the like, the first one, her boss goes to scout a location, and he doesn't come back when he's supposed to, and they get worried about him, and he has some personal issues that they think, "Well, maybe he's fallen into old habits," and so she has to go look for him, and so that sets her on this journey, and then once she's over there, she meets some people and gets invited to go work there, and so then the series, you know, it's all in England from, like, book 2 on. Most of book 1 as well.
so how do you research, it for those I mean, are you doing location researching too? Are you
Yes. Yes, yeah, that book had different aspects because I wanted to research the locations, and then I had to research what it would be like to be a location scout because I've never
right.
done that, and, so, yeah, I made a trip over there before I ever started writing. It was just I just wanted to go there and see what it was like, and when I was there, I thought, you know, "This could be a really great setting for that kind of germ of an idea I had." And, so I just took a ton of pictures, visited as much as I could, and, you know, just kind of went from there. And so then when I got back, I started researching like the location scout aspect. And it's more difficult, I think. If you live there, it'd be easy because then, you know, if you forget something, you could run out and go check, you know, that country home. How did you get to it or what were the grounds like? So I have to rely now more on, you know, Google Earth, YouTube, you know, things like that, because we can't travel as much now.
But are
So,
you using real locations, or do you fictionalize those locations?
I've pretty much fictionalized the locations unless it's a big city like London or something like
Mm,
that.
mm.
I will the the inspiration for the Murder on Location series was Chatsworth and Bakewell and kind of that area around there because I just thought it was just such an interesting little area and so beautiful, and so that was kind of the inspiration for that, but that isn't in my book. There I take what's in real life and kind of just give it my own little twist, you know?
Mm, mhm. Yeah. Okay, we talked about Jane Austen.
Mhm.
That makes me think about, as you said, movies. So,
Mhm.
I have this odd little desert island that I'm gonna send you to, um, but it has the facilities to play movies. Unfortunately, only 3 movies. So, forevermore, you have to watch these 3 movies. Which ones are you gonna take with you?
Okay, well, I would have to take I would probably take, uh, Sense and Sensibility because I really like that one. Um, I would take something classic like To Catch a Thief, probably,
Mm.
and, something with a lot of humor to make me laugh, probably like, Grosse Point Blank. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's got John Cusack, and he goes
Yeah.
home. The assassin, he tries to go home, and nobody believes him when he tells them he's an assassin. It's hilarious. So, yeah, that's probably what I take.
Okay. That's an interesting that's an interesting mix.
That's why my books are so quirky, I guess.
Now, is that what do readers say that? Do readers say your books are quirky? What do readers tend to say about your books that tie through all your series?
Um, well, a lot of people email me and thank me for writing clean books because they don't have a lot of cussing, like that term, like clean, meaning like there's not cussing or, everything. If there's romance, it's, very, very PG.
Mm.
So a lot of people like that aspect to them. And um, I've been hearing a lot lately because we're in the middle of kind of all this COVID stuff, just people saying, thank you for this escape.
Yeah.
Just to get my head out of all this stuff that's going on right now and give me an escape for a little while. And peop- and people know with my books that they're going to be, uh, even though they're murder mysteries, they're going to have they're going to end okay. You know, justice will be restored.
Yeah. Okay, this is a question I'm really fascinated by, but it does sort of put people on the spot. Do
Oh
you
no.
have any really strong fears, and do you use them in books?
Oh, I do have plenty of strong fears. I don't like bugs, don't like spiders, things like that, but I don't think I've ever used them in a book because I think that's one thing my readers know is that they're not going to be, I don't know, grossed out or get the creepy crawlies when they're reading my books, so that would not work for my books.
So you stay away from them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Well, maybe let's do you have quotes? Do you have a quote that you love that
Oh,
you
yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love quotes.
by?
I got a million of them. Okay, so probably my favorite writing quote is, "Just get it down on paper, and then we'll see what to do about it." And that was said by Maxwell Perkins, and I ran across that when I was writing or trying to write my first book, and I have this tendency to I was writing the first chapter, rewriting it, and when I saw that, I thought, "Okay, I have to get this whole thing down on paper and then see where I am because it's not gonna do me any good to just go over the first chapter,
Yep.
forever." So that really helped me. And then there's another quote, I can't quote it just exactly right, but it's the one about you can see as far you writing is just like driving at night. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
only see as far as your headlights show, but you can
Yeah.
make it the whole way. So I love that
Yeah.
one too.
Yep.
Yeah.
My headlights jump around. What can I say?
Yeah. Well, it
Yeah,
works
those are
though.
great I think my favorite is, from Somerset Maugham.
Mhm.
There are 3
Oh,
rules to writing. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are.
I know, I love that one too. That's a good one.
Oh. Do you have a favorite taste?
Mm, probably sweet, like chocolate. I
Mm.
love
Mm.
chocolate. Dark chocolate.
And a favorite color?
Love green, like green and blue, like really rich colors, green and blue and purple, things like that.
Those gem
Yeah,
colors.
yeah.
Yeah. Did you when you were before you were really writing, did you used to, rewrite stories in your head? Maybe you didn't like the ending, you didn't find it satisfying.
Mm.
And how did you get started writing?
Well, it wasn't like that. I don't remember doing that for any stories, but I do remember, like, I would try and describe things in my head, like views that we would see or places that we would go or, you know, people that we would meet. I would try and make up little stories about them in my head. And I don't remember, I made a couple of attempts to write stories. And, you know, but not I didn't do it endlessly. Like, you hear some people say, that they wrote all the time. My stuff was more in my head, and I didn't write it down as often. But then, when we had had our second child, and my husband said, "I think it's time for one of us to go back and get our master's degree." And I was like, "Well, I'm not doing that." I didn't want to. It's like, "You can go right ahead." But I said, "If I'm gonna spend any time doing anything, I want to write a book," because that's something I'd always wanted to do. And so I thought, if I'm gonna take time to away from being a mom and running the household and all that, because I had 2 kids under 3, I
Ooh.
wanted to try and write. So that's what I did. I wrote during nap time, and it took me forever, but I finally got a book finished. So it took me about 3 or 4 years to get a draft, but I got it done.
Was that a mystery?
Yes, yeah, that was
Ah.
actually, and I had other things that I'd attempted and I started and stopped, over the years kind of leading up to that, but that was the first one that I finished, and then I started going to writers' conferences and getting feedback, and this was back in the day when, it was like traditionally publish or,
Yeah.
that was like pretty much the way to go. Indie publishing didn't really exist, and so I got an agent. It took me about a year to revise it and get it in a good shape, and then it took me about a year to get an agent, and then it took her a while to sell it, and so it was a really slow process, but she did eventually sell that book, and that became the Ellie series, the one about the military spouse.
And are you continuing to write that traditionally?
No, I did 10 books in that series, and I felt that that was plenty of books in that series, and I felt like that well had kind of run dry. I'd said everything I wanted to say about that series.
Mm.
And then I had started indie publishing a couple years before I decided that that would be the last Ellie book. And so for a while there, I was doing both. I was doing traditional and indie. And I really enjoy indie publishing. And so that's kind of the track that I've gone down for the last, I don't know, I think my first indie book came out in 2012, but I didn't go all indie until maybe 2015,
Mhm.
16, somewhere in there.
Did you find having that first book published, and maybe particularly traditionally published, did that change your process at all, or did it change your view on your writing or you as a writer?
Um, well, I think there is some validation. Like, you do feel some validation being published with a traditional publisher. So there was that. That was nice. But there were certain things that I liked about it, and there were certain things that I didn't like about it. And um, I came to realize that no one is going to care as much about my books as me, no matter how
Mm.
nice people are and how much they help me, and how supportive they are. There's a limit to what a traditional publisher can do for you, unless you're their star. And I was not the star. I was definitely the mid-list, also ran author, you know?
Mm.
So I can do more on my own, I feel like, than I can. And I'm very focused and independent, and I like making the choices of what my covers are gonna look like, and as long as I don't have to make them myself, if I can outsource that,
Yeah,
that's great. So I like the control that I have as a indie publisher.
me too. I think but, the idea of doing my own cover actually, I did do my own covers at the very, very beginning, and then as soon as I started earning money from the books, I cycled around and got
Yeah.
professional. So they weren't quite stick figures, but they were pretty darn
Oh,
close.
mine would not be good. That was one thing I knew. I was like, "Okay, I gotta spend some money on this because it will not go well if I try and do it."
So, can you think of your all your books, and is there one that was particularly easy to write or a joy to write?
Um I think I enjoyed the historical because I'd been reading the one that's set in 1923. That first one is called Murder at Archley Manor, and I'd been reading those books for a while. I read them first just because I enjoyed Golden Age mysteries like Agatha Christie and Dorothy
Mm.
Sayers. I just enjoyed those. So then I started researching it and I came up with this idea. And by the time I was ready to write it, I was really excited and it was something new and it was a completely different type of writing than a contemporary cozy. And even though the books kind of had the same tone, they're both, they're
Mhm.
all my books are pretty lighthearted, but it was just something totally different. So that one, every book has its challenges, but that one I really enjoyed. It was just lots of fun to write.
Is there any difficulty for you in switching from that historical voice to the contemporary and vice versa? Do you find
Um,
you slip into the wrong voice now and then, or
Not usually. I did do a thing with the travel series and the historical where I did a crossover, and I had it's a dual timeline, dual narrator storyline. And so I have the modern day storyline with this woman who's looking for a painting that went missing in 1923. And so then I have the Olive storyline of she's also looking for that painting in 1923. So it went missing
oh,
twice. So that one I couldn't switch back and forth because the storylines are interspersed throughout the book. You get one point of view and then in another chapter you have another point of view. And I couldn't write it like that. I had to write one. I ended up writing, I think I wrote the historical storyline first, and then I wrote the modern, and then I spliced them together. And
and what's the name of that book?
that one's called Duplicity.
Ooh,
Yeah.
great name, great
Yeah, so that
title.
one was a lot of fun, but, I did find it hard to switch back and forth, but I think it was because I was doing it I was trying to do it at the same time. If I'm just doing one book, I can get down into the mind frame, and then I can once I get rolling, I'm fine.
Do you find it slaps over into your real life, like you're using 1920 British slang, do you in the grocery store?
No, the other day, my husband said something about, something like, "What do you want for dinner, old bean?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I've been doing a little 1920 slang too much, I guess. Yeah, so a little bit of that.
This is a question kind of out of left field, but I'm curious about what's something that you're really good at that few people know about?
Mm. I'm really good at reading maps, although we don't do that anymore.
Interesting.
And I do love maps, and I would like to use that, like, as a theme or a connecting point for a series sometimes, maybe about a map maker or, um, something like that someday. I love that. Um,
Do you have a good sense of direction?
I do. Yeah,
Huh,
I
yeah,
do. Yeah,
I do usually too.
yeah.
Um,
I'm really good at researching, but that's kinda known. We've talked about that.
yes, but necessary. It's something that's really important to be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Um, okay, here's a question from a reader who asks if you have a particular place, a special place that you like to write, and very kindly asks if it has a good view. I think
It's
there's
so
a wish
important.
there for us to have a good view, and I'll throw into that too. Do you have a routine, a
Okay.
writing routine?
Okay. Yeah, I do have an office that I have my desk and I have everything set up, and that's where I do my writing. Um, and it does have a view, and that's really funny that that question asked specifically about a view because we've moved a lot, and the places that we've lived, I have to have a view. Like, I can't I've tried having my office in, like, a basement room, and it just doesn't work. I can't do it. I have to be able to look
Mm,
out the window, which is really funny. So, yes, mine does have a nice view. And so let's say routine. I I do sort of in phases where, like, if I'm writing a book, that's my main focus, and I work on that book, and then I'll do, minimal admin stuff and things to keep everything going, and I'll do that kinda work that in, but, like, when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is work on my book, and lately I've started using dictation, so I get up and I just dictate, and then I
interesting.
I have those raw words, and they're terrible, they're really raw, it's just awful. Some people can dictate beautiful, paragraphs that really don't need much editing, but mine do. but I feel like at least I have the words and I've kind of gotten them out of my head and I can rearrange them. So, like, after I do that, after I have them on the screen, I'll go in and kind of clean them up and make everything look good. And I'll just work on my book for usually takes me a couple months to write a book. And then once I have the draft down, then I kind of start switching back to um, other tasks that need to be done, like bigger projects. And I'll take time between books to do like, if my website needs to be revamped or if I need to update my autoresponder sequence or whatever, I'll do those projects kind of in between books. So I kind of work in phases. And I think that's because I do like when I'm working on a book on a draft, I want to get that draft done, even though it's going to take me like 2 or 3 months. I
Mm.
still, that's hard. It's hard for me to focus on other things besides the book when I'm in that phase.
I refer to it, there's a point for me where I'm living inside the book,
Hmm.
and I can't have other stuff pulling me away.
Right.
But
Yeah.
for
It's
me,
like
it
you're in
tends
it.
to be at the end, and it tends to be very intense. I mean,
Yes. Me
I'll
too.
walk outside and it's like, "Wait a minute, the weather's wrong,"
I
because
know. I know. No, because 'cause you're in book world, and
yes, I'm in
everything
book
is
world.
consumed by that. Yes, everything else is a haze. Yes, I
So
totally understand that.
when you're going through this, though, are you working more normal hours, or, do
Yeah.
you binge, or
Well, I'll usually do a couple of hours in the morning, take a break for lunch, then I'll do maybe another hour or 2, and then I try and get in a workout or a walk or something like that, and, then have dinner, and sometimes I'll go back to it in the evening, but not always. I like to have time in the evening to read, and that's pretty much my schedule most days, and then I try and take weekends mostly off, but, when I do get to the end, and especially when I finish the first draft and I'm going through reading, I do a big reread all the way through for my first pass, and I like to do that as fast as I can because I just wanna get to the end. I just wanna make sure that it all works and flows together, so I try and do that pretty quickly. So I have a tendency to binge during that time.
and that's reading it the way a reader would.
Yes.
Yeah.
And making notes and thinking, "Oh, I didn't here's a flaw that I missed that I've gotta go in and fill this plot hole," or, whatever that needs to be done, but a lot of it's just noticing because I feel like I inch along as I'm writing the draft, and then when you get done and you go back and you read it quickly, you're like, "Oh, she we didn't even have a day between the murder and the inquest. Like,
Mm.
there would be some time in my writing world, it feels like it's been, like, 3 months. But in reality, in book time, it's been, like, 1 day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find that too, you think, "Oh, I haven't explained such and such," and so
Mhm.
you put a little explanation in, and when
Mm.
you go back and read, you go, "Okay, I'd explained that 5 other times."
True. It's
And
so true.
if my memory were better, I
I
might be able
know,
to write
but it
faster.
all becomes a blur when
Yes,
you're in the
yeah.
weeds like that, yeah.
Have you had any books that really surprised you? Maybe that one where it wasn't the
Yeah,
murderer you thought it was? So what's the title of that?
that one's
Or am I don't wanna say that has to be the book if you have another
Oh,
one
no,
you'd
no,
rather
I
s
think that's a good one. That one was called Death in a Stately Home, and that's the 3rd book in the Murder on Location series, and that one, I decided I would write a locked room mystery 'cause I had never done that, and I thought, "Oh, this sounds fun," and then, like, a month later, I'm, like, tearing my hair out and telling my husband, "Why do I set these things up to be this way?" And my family's
And did
walking
you get
really
any
quietly.
sympathy?
They just keep their distance. They're like, "Yeah, yeah, we're so sorry. It's not going well." But anyway, that one all got worked out. So, yeah, that's a good one, and I have had other ones that I think a certain character is gonna be a certain way, and then they turn out to not be that way. I remember I had an Ellie book, that's the military spouse series, and I
Uh-huh.
had this, she was a part-time professional organizer, and she was the only organizer in this small little town where the military base was. And then another professional organizer moved to town and started stealing all her clients. And I was like, oh, this would be so annoying. And I was like, so that other professional organizer is going to be the victim.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized the story was so much better if she wasn't the victim, but if somebody else died and then those two women had to work together to solve the crime. So there was all this like sparky conversation where they're like learning to work
Oh,
together. So that was a lot of fun.
that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. And
That one
that's a
took me
good
by
twist
surprise.
because a lot of people would think she would
Yeah.
be the victim.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So that one was fun to write. Yeah.
okay, that's cool. Okay, we talked about covers a little bit. I want to come back to that because there was a question from a reader about who says when the cover image doesn't match the character description, and the reader says, a pet peeve of mine, how does it feel? But and because I know you were traditional, so
Mhm.
you could talk about that. But I also would like to know how you address it as an independent author and having a cover designer to avoid having that feeling.
Well, it is annoying. I completely agree. And I most readers don't realize that authors don't have a lot of say on their covers when they're traditionally
Mhm.
published. So I have gotten covers back and I've thought, huh, that is not at all how I envisioned this. and
You are so nice, Sarah. That is not what I feel when I got some of those covers.
well, I didn't have a whole lot of input. I mean, they would, it was odd. They would always ask me what I wanted. Most of the time, everything looked beautiful and I liked it. But there were a couple that I just thought, huh, that's just not what I would pick. But anyway, so like when it's me, um, I've learned that I need to tell my cover artist the feeling that I want the cover to invoke. And I show her like a lot of covers that are similar to what I like and that I don't want her to copy them, but I want her to like draw inspiration from those.
Mm,
And I've learned that it's not so important that she recreate like this exact scene from the book or this exact view or whatever. Or I usually don't have people on my covers, so usually it's more like a landscape or um, kind of my historicals are more vector art, I think is what
mm,
you would call it,
mm.
and so they're really bold, bright, but they're not people. They're not a photo that's been manipulated. So you have some you're not looking for realism there either. But I think that it's more important that they catch the feeling. And so if
Mm.
somebody looks at it and goes, "Oh, I love books like this," then that's what you want. And there's some of my covers that most of my ones that I put out as an indie, I love, but there are a couple that I'm like, that's not quite how I envisioned it, but it does its job and it shows readers what they're going to get. And that's more important than being exact match to the story.
That's a really good point of what the job of the cover is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think that may be especially true for ebooks,
Mhm.
where you're influenced by the cover in purchasing, but then you don't really see it that much. I mean, you
Yes,
see a
it's
thumbnail
true.
in your library, in your reader library, but it's not
Yeah.
like a physical book where
Right.
it's sitting on the bedside table and you see it every time you pick it up.
Yes.
And,
Yeah, that's true. I think that's why I always include the blurb within the text of the book so that when people click on it, if they because they usually won't see the cover. If they've opened it and read like a chapter
yeah,
2, they might go, "Oh, that's right. This is that book about, whatever," without seeing the cover. So it's very interesting that we don't see them as much as we used to.
yeah. Well, I think my first reaction when you said, well, you put the blurb in, I thought, oh, I should do that. And then I thought, 50 plus
Too late
books.
now. I know. That's what happens when you get a catalog as big as yours. It's a lot of
Uh,
work to redo things, yeah.
it sure is. And I have to quit having ideas. So
Yes.
I don't mean for new books, I mean for changing the
I
formatting
know.
and stuff. Um,
Yeah, I understand that.
Sort of a related question. This is again in the process of bringing the book out, and a
Mhm.
different reader asked about how much it bothers you to find editing errors.
Ugh, I hate editing errors. I hate typos, and I work really hard to not have them in my books. But, you know, we're imperfect and something always slips through. And I had one reader email me one time and say, most people are just super nice and they're like, "Hey, by the way, in case you want to know, this one popped up in chapter 10 or whatever."
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
emailed her back and I said, I don't like typos and you can never get rid of them all. And she said, she phrased it, she said, editing and proofreading is a forever commitment. And I was like, that is so true. Because,
I like that. I
yeah,
like
you'll have
that.
a book that's out for like 5 years and then
Yep.
somebody finds it's just amazing. So, yes, I don't like that. And the thing is, I'm not really good at finding my own typos to the point now that I have my copy editor work on it. I make the changes. I send it to a proofreader, make the changes, and I have another proofreader after that because I just feel like I can't see the errors anymore. And it's better to outsource it and let somebody else help me.
Well, I'm a longtime editor from
Mhm.
newspapers, and I'm pretty good, but nobody can catch all of them. Number
Yeah.
1. Number 2, our brains fill in what
Oh,
should
yes.
be there all the
Yes.
time. So it's
Yes.
really, really hard to separate, and especially because you've written it, you know what the meaning
Mhm.
of the sentence is, so you're filling in what the meaning should be. And
Yes.
um, one of the
Yes, it's
tricks, if you ever really need to proofread something that you've written, is this sounds really weird, but read it backwards.
yes, I've heard that. Yes.
Because you're breaking the train of the meeting. That's also
Mhm.
one of the reasons to read out loud. Read it
Yeah,
out loud.
I've done that, and I used to before I started sending it out to more proofreaders to help me, was I would listen to it, I would have it read to me, and I would
Mm,
catch a lot of errors, but then that just takes time, it
it
just
takes
takes a
a lot
long
of time.
time.
Yes.
So, I decided it was a better use of my time to have somebody else do that so I can start either on the next book or taking care of all this, admin
Yes.
stuff that needs to be done. So, yeah, I don't like those. I don't like
I
typos.
I've also found that, having the book go through narration for audiobook,
Oh,
they
yes.
catch more things.
Yes, it's
Isn't that
amazing.
interesting? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And then there's the factor that if I have to restrain myself because I could go back and change books
Oh,
forever.
but once they're in audio, do you change them?
I would. I wouldn't change the audio again probably, but I would change
Right.
well, I did actually I had to change narrators in the Caught Dead in
Uh-huh.
Wyoming series because the first narrator, retired from narrating.
Oh.
But, um and so I had my new narrator, Betsy, picked up the series, and then she came back and recycled to the first 3
Mhm.
books that the other narrator had done, so there's continuity.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, I slipped in and I made some changes for this.
Yeah, see,
Uh,
my books used to be more, I guess you'd say, iterative, like, readers would like, if they found a typo or something, I would go in and change it and fix it. But now I feel like and I did make some tweaks, like small tweaks, not huge things to the plot, but, made some changes. But now I feel like my goal is to have the audio out either with the ebook in print or fairly close to it. And now I feel like,
uh,
wow, the audio's done. That book it's done. Don't want to be messing with it too much.
see, I found a way to sneak back in.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is exactly what you said. You stop moving forward with new works.
Right. Yeah.
So, you gotta make the decision of how to spend your time. Um,
Yes. That's very true.
I've got more reader questions I wanna cover here, and,
Okay.
we touched on this lightly, Sarah, but, um, let me read you the question from the reader. She says, "Where do your stories come from? I know one author who dreams her stories. Another has a character suddenly taking up residence in her head. So, how are your beautiful stories born?
Oh, that's a nice question. I don't think I've ever dreamed a story. Mine seem to grow out of places that I've visited,
Mhm.
and um, a lot of times I'll do reading in uh, just nonfiction stuff, or like I'll watch a documentary, and there'll just be some idea that will just spark some story. And I'll think, oh, that's a good mystery, or,
Uh,
then, and that could be explored. So a lot of times it's nonfiction that I've read. I did have when I was writing the Murder on Location series, that's the English Village one.
mhm,
I was writing that and I just thought, huh, wonder what was going on. Because the village that I've created and named is called Nether Woodsmore. And I was like, huh, I wonder what Nether Woodsmore was like in the 1920s. And then I was
uh.
like, oh, that's interesting. And so what I did was I took that village, but the historical series is set in the past, but in the same village. So like the stately home is the same,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, so it's linked in a way, but that was just a jumping off point for an idea that just kind of a random thought. And I felt like, I'd kind of been wanting to write a historical, and I was like, well, why wouldn't I use this world that I've already created? And I didn't actually use the people who had lived in the stately home. I have a poor relation who knows them and lives in the village, so she's associated with the stately home, but she
Mhm,
doesn't live in it.
mhm.
Because I was like, "Oh, I can't handle the continuity of generations and, the genealogy chart I would have to have if if it was the person who lived in the stately home in that family." So, yeah, so that's kind of how mine it's all random. I don't know that I can put my finger on a specific way that my ideas always show up.
And then that's the those are 2 series are the ones where you have the historical thread and the,
Mhm.
contemporary thread.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
was the reader how did readers react to that? What sort of response did you get?
Oh, to Duplicity, the one
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
um, I readers liked it. I don't know
great.
that it was a smart decision marketing-wise because it's not linked with both series. So I can only link it through the bookstores with one series. So there are all these
Oh,
readers going, "Well, when are we gonna find out what happened here?" And I'm like, "Oh, that book is already out. It's over here." You know? So it's
ah,
just keeping everybody informed. And so I need to create a reading list for people so they'll know where it goes. And then I think that'll answer that question. I mean, I have my list of books, but I think I need to say, "Hey, if you're reading this series, this book goes here." So, but I think they liked it. They liked the
that's great.
combining. Yeah.
But it's a shame that the retailers don't have the flexibility to serve the readers.
I know, but can you imagine
Like,
what a nightmare that would be? That would be like, okay, this is book 4.5 in this series, and we'll go to I don't know how they would even do it. I mean, I'm not
there
technology
but
savvy,
they
but there's a
are.
way.
They should be able to do it. And that
Yeah.
that's the way to serve the readers, to
Yeah.
let them
Yeah.
be able to connect those dots. Like I have series. This is in romance, but I have the series that have prequels to some of the books,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
don't. The retail, some of the retailers don't have the capacity
Mhm.
to include those books in the series.
So then they're kind of orphaned, just kind
Yeah,
of out yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So that
and
makes it
that
difficult.
and that brings me to a question I usually come to later, but it pops up right now. Do you have any books that you feel are sort of orphaned, that are hidden gems that maybe even your regular readers aren't as aware of as you would like?
Well, let's see. I think the travel series isn't as well read, I guess you'd say, as the historical or the cozies. So the travel series, it is cozy. I would call it cozy. But the first book in that series is called Elusive. And it's not quite cozy. It's not quite romance. It's not quite a thriller. It's kind of straddles all these different genres. And that's
Ooh,
probably why it's not is read as much.
That sounds
Be-
wonderful. I love those.
so I would say that when readers have a tendency, like mystery readers say, oh, it's got some romance in it. No, I'll pass. Or people who like cozies that are set like in the same little town or village. They don't want to travel all over the world, So it's kind of its own thing. But then the people who love it, they love it. It's like you've
Yeah.
got to find that little group of people and it's a little bit smaller. But I think because there's not a lot of books like it, they're very loyal. So that's kind of one that series is it was the first series I wrote as an indie and I just put in there everything I wanted to put. you
Mm,
know? And
which
so
is
I
the
think
joy of
yeah.
indiehood, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think maybe that's why it doesn't fit neatly into any category. But yeah, so that's kind of my one that people don't know about it. It's not as well known.
Do you have a particular book that you would, say, "Yes, this somebody who's never read me, this is the place to start"?
I would say if you like historical, then start with Murder at Archley Manor. If historical is not your cup of tea, but you like contemporary mysteries, then start with Death in the English Countryside. Those are both book ones and kind of introduce you to the different characters and the situations.
Great.
So, yeah.
I uh, I'm gonna ask you a hard question because I
Oh,
wanna know
no.
the answer.
Okay.
What's your relationship with reviews?
Oh, it's conflicted. Oh, yeah. So, I think, um, I used to read a lot more of my reviews than I do now, and I think there is value in reading the reviews, especially if you see something coming up over and over and over again. It's obviously something that's maybe needs some work. Um, but I've learned not to read all my reviews because I've noticed that if a review is great, I'm like, "Oh, that was nice," and I just go on with my day and don't really think about it. But if it's a bad review, it's like, "Oh," it's just like
Yeah,
it hurts so bad and like it throws me off. And so I feel like that's not a healthy relationship. That's not a
right.
healthy thing to have. So I try and put my books out there, and I also know that some people just they're not what they're looking for. And some people are going to express that in a way that could hurt my feelings. And so
Mhm,
I don't seek that out. I do check and make sure everything's going okay, that the majority of the reviews, are a certain level, but it's okay if people don't like the books. And it's okay if they write a bad review because I've learned that a bad review can help you as well. uh, my friend Jamie and I were just talking about this, how she said she had
mm,
a book that the reader did not like. She said, "Oh, I hate slow burn romances, and this was a slow burn." But other people are going to be like, "Oh, I love slow burn
yeah,
romances." So I think
yeah.
it's the same thing. So it's it's no fun to get a bad review, but it's not like they can't get you readers as well. It's interesting. It's a
Well,
very
that's true,
interesting,
that's true.
yeah.
And that would be a good way to say if a reviewer says, "I hate slow burn romances," I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Each person has their own reading experience. The ones that get under my skin are, "This is an awful book because it's a slow burn romance." And you think, "Well,
Hmm.
no." It's
It's
and
just
it's
not what you wanted.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite ones are the ones that say, "Loved it, great book, 1 star." And
Yeah.
I think, did your finger slip when you were doing
I
that, or did you not understand that
I
1 star is bad?
I think I think they didn't understand, yes.
Yeah, because sometimes
Uh,
a star is good, like a Publisher's Weekly
yeah.
starred review is good.
I just saw a T-shirt that had, 2020 1 star.
Oh, yes, I agree. I think we all agree with that.
It's been quite the year.
Yes.
Um, okay, this is just a wonderful question. If you could write a book with any author, alive or dead,
Mm.
who would you wanna work with and why?
Oh my goodness. Can I do a collaboration with, like, 3? No, I'll answer the question.
Actually, yes, I will let you do that, and the reason is so many of the authors cheat on the 3-movie question, and you didn't. You picked 3 movies. You
Oh,
didn't
okay.
pick the entire Star Wars series.
Alright. We're like
So I
the
will give you leeway on this one.
okay, so I would say Agatha Christie, because she was so good at plotting. I think that would just be interesting to see how she worked out a plot. And, um, Elizabeth Peters, because people love her characters. She was so much fun to listen to and see how her characters developed. So I think that would be like the best of both worlds. And although I love Agatha Christie's characters as well, her plots were just amazing. So yeah, that's who I'd pick.
I met Elizabeth Peters,
Oh, did you?
late in her life, well, at an event, and so we talked for a little while. She was just charming. She was just
Yeah.
delightful. So
Yeah.
I
I
think
love her stuff.
that's a great choice.
Oh, good.
Sometimes, you meet a writer and there's a disconnect between
Yes.
their personality and their work, and,
Yes.
and that can go either way. You love the
Yes.
person and the book isn't, you know, y
Yeah, it's
what
just
you're
not what
looking
you're
for in a
expecting.
read. Yeah,
Right, yeah.
um, and then sometimes it goes the other way, but in that instance, she was very much like her work, so,
Oh, that's good.
always
I'm
have a
glad to
warm
hear that.
feeling about her. Yeah,
That's good.
I always loved the book of hers. I don't think it was under Elizabeth Peters, it was the other Shattered Silk.
Oh, yeah, I don't think I've read that one. Barbara
Oh, you
Michaels,
should
right?
read that. You should read that. I think you'd
Okay, I'll
like
put
it.
that on my list.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have that well, I'll break it into 2. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to answer?
Don't think so. I think that we've covered a lot.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you don't want to answer
No, I think we've done great.
that I could wheedle out of you? Some some drama here.
I'm a pretty low drama person.
Okay, we're gonna do, rapid fire either ors.
Okay, I'm ready.
Um, you're and I'm betting you're gonna be good about this. You're not gonna cheat on this either.
I'll
Okay.
try not to.
Mustard or ketchup?
Ketchup.
Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics?
Winter.
Good for you. Cat or dog?
Dog.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Heels or slippers?
Slippers.
Spring or fall?
Fall.
Ice cream or cake?
Cake.
Okay, I have this question. Think about this, you know, pre-2020.
Okay.
Cruise or trekking vacation?
Okay, say it again, I couldn't hear. There was
A
a
cruise or a trekking vacation?
Oh, trekking.
Paper plates or best china?
Paper plates.
Mountains or beach?
Mountains.
Day or night?
Mm, night.
Pickup or sports car?
Pickup.
Opera or show tunes?
Show tunes.
Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Hiking boots.
House decorating or gardening?
Ooh, house decorating.
Sailboat or motorboat?
Motorboat.
Leggings or sweats?
Sweats.
Hot air balloon or train trip?
Ooh, train trip.
Appetizer or dessert?
Dessert.
Daisies or roses?
Roses.
Jigsaw puzzle or crossword puzzle?
Oh, jigsaw puzzle.
Binge watch or make the watching last as long as possible?
Ooh, binge.
And we'll wrap up on this one. Do you grab the best first or save the best for last?
Oh, I always save the best for last.
That's that dessert eater in you.
Yes, it is. It is.
I've been
It
known
is.
to order backwards in restaurants to see what the dessert is, and then, okay, they have great desserts, I'll have a salad.
Well, that makes sense too. I can totally see doing that.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, Sarah. I really appreciate your coming on the podcast and, answering all my nosy questions.
It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad all you listeners tuned in for this episode of Authors Love Readers podcast. Hope you'll come back. We have more guests coming, and it's always fun to hear the stories behind the stories. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye.